Here's the ratio between number of customers to number of operations / CX folks since really the beginning. I remember this very, very first spreadsheet that we had. And that was a goal. And every time we made decisions, like a lot of product decisions or hiring decisions around customer care, like what should customer help with versus what should be self-serve, like we looked at that ratio and we asked ourselves, are we marching towards this ratio or away from this ratio?
Welcome to My First 16. Today, we're chatting with Tomer London, co-founder of Gusto. Gusto is valued at almost $10 billion and serves over 300,000 businesses by simplifying payroll, benefits, and HR. But as you'll hear from Tomer, the journey, which started over a decade ago, began with him locking himself into a room for over an hour and cold calling customers until he perfected his sales pitch. That determination continued as you'll hear about the challenges they faced building trust with small and medium-sized businesses and how they found a surprising advocate in accountants. Let's jump in. Tomer, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. Kick us off with the founding story and background on Gusto.
Thanks, Seema. I'm excited. So, hey, thanks again for having me today. I'm Tomer. I'm one of the founders of Gusto. Gusto today helps over 300,000 businesses, small, medium, large, in the US with payroll, with benefits, with HR, with the entire employee lifecycle, and building a team. But when we started it, that was, believe it or not, over a decade ago. Was me, myself, Josh, and Eddie, my co-founders, and all of us have a background in small businesses. For me personally, my dad and my mom, they have a small clothing store back in Israel, where I'm from. And I grew up going to the store almost every day after school, whether it's, and helping in just really anything, like cleaning the store and organizing and selling and, answering phone calls or whatever that was. And, I have a lot of memories growing up and thinking about all the different hats that small business owners need to wear and all the different problems that they need to solve. Josh and Eddie have similar stories with their families and friends. And when we got together around 10 years ago, we connected on this shared experience. All of us also have previous startup experiences before, so we knew we wanted to build something for the long term, something meaningful, and to focus on people we really, really love and make a big difference in their lives. So for us, small business was just an incredible place to start and help them, build and grow their team. So that's how we started. We connected together through the Stanford community. Actually, the three of us were graduate students and graduates of the program in electrical engineering.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you knew payroll was a huge pain point for small businesses. I'm assuming you started building the product, and then when it was ready to get into people's hands, how did you decide, okay, these are the types of small businesses we're going to start with?
Yeah, totally. So, we were focused on small businesses, wanted to solve real problems for them, and we learned that payroll is this huge, huge pain point. Every time I talk with a small business owner or a startup about how do you feel about your payroll experience, how do you feel about your payroll vendor, like you got a lot of emotions, you got a lot of anger and frustration. So as a product person, when you hear someone being really, really frustrated, there's something there. So we wanted to start with payroll. We knew that that's not just a huge problem to solve, it's also where you have a lot of the data about the employees. And if you do a really good job with payroll, you'll get the chance to then solve additional problems, again, like we're doing today. So to your question around the kind of the type of customers we would start with. So, I would say there's kind of two sides to my brain answering this question. The first one is, beggars can't be choosers. So, early on, you just talk with everybody, right? So, whether, you go and, one of our first customers was a flower shop, and the way we got connected to that flower shop is that Eddie, my co-founder, ordered flowers, and while he was doing that, he said, by the way, what do you use for payroll? And then he got the conversation started, and that's how that started. We were also part of the Y Combinator incubator program, and obviously we went to every single batchmate multiple times until they agreed to try us out as their payroll provider. So, I would say on one side, you are really, really trying to focus on sharing, that kind of keep repeating your pitch, keep improving your pitch, understanding, customers, reaction to this pitch, and then try to get them to join. On the other side, you need to be very, very selective. So let me talk a little bit about that too. So
Great.
when we chose this, you had interest from customers. How do you choose who to work with and actually to invest in? I would say there's two big things. The first one is you want to make sure to bring in customers that you can really provide great service to, right? So because these initial customers are your seed for your word of mouth, and everything flows from there. So to do that, you need to be very, very selective on a small subsegment of target customer. So for us, it was so small you wouldn't believe. It was just California companies who have salaried employees only, so no hourly employees, who have no benefits or any other deductions from their payroll, and it's their first payroll ever. So it's a very, very, very tiny group. But we knew that if we do a great job for them, we can then keep expanding over time. So that's the first thing. It's really about providing great service. The second thing that was important when we decided who to work with is focusing on people that will help us generate learnings. So what does that mean? It means that they enabled us, they were patient enough, they were, I would say, innovative enough in the way they were thinking to actually let us spend time with them and understand why they're doing what they're doing in the system, what questions they have, what's clear, what's not clear. So as a result, I was personally spending tons of time with every single one of these initial customers, literally physically in their office with them when they were running their first payrolls, when they were adding their employees, or on the phone every time they ran payroll. And again, these are the sort of people where I felt like they were interested in helping us innovate and helping us build a great product. And it was fun for them to be a part of that experience. So these are the two things: customers who help you, generate learnings, and then also people who you feel like you could really provide great service to.
And okay, so lots of great follow-up questions to this. If you think about that small subset in California, like how did you even go find that set of customers? Was it some sort of search? Or I'm curious how you went about constructing that list.
The list of customers. Yeah, so when we started the company, we were really focused on these new small businesses and new startups. So organically, we were part of this incubator program in YC. And companies all around us were all in California. Companies all around us were mostly salaried employees, no hourly employees. So it kind of like worked in terms of the simplicity of the initial customer. It was organic around the people who we already were around. And then when we went and talked with people, whether it's me literally every day going into a room, closing the door, and picking up a Yelp page like hairdressers in San Francisco. And then closing the door, looking at the clock, I have 1 hour, and I'm not going to leave this room until I call for a whole hour, one hairdresser at a time, and try to pitch them our payroll solution. I did that every day, and then you use the same pitch every day, and you see what sticks and what doesn't. And then we basically had this initial set of customers, and that's where later on, when we did a public launch, so in the beginning, it was just like a small beta, and literally we went one by one and gave people pitches, right? That's kind of where we were really, really starting. But a few months later, when we had a public launch, when we announced our seed round and everything, we opened a waiting list. And then what you do is exactly to your point, in the waiting list, you ask people the questions, the qualifying questions are, do they fit the previous, kind of the way we structured the product, the initial product, or they don't. And then that's how you know who to bring and when.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's common. The YC batch is a great, obviously initial customer set, and I'll come back to that. But one other point you mentioned was customers who are excited to give you feedback, or early customers. How did you figure out what was it? Was it just enthusiasm? A lot of complaints about their payroll? Like, was there anything in particular that flagged, okay, I think this person's going to be a great, like, almost design partner, or just provide a lot of feedback in the early days?
Yeah, you're right. It's basically a design partner, but it's like a very, very small scale of a few people company, right? So calling it a design partner feels like a big enterprise. I would say it's just people that when you start working with them and asking them questions, their answers make sense in a way that as a product person helps you. So for example, asking, okay, how do you feel about your current payroll company? And they say, oh, it sucks. And we say, okay, why? What's wrong? And then you have the people who sit down. So here's an example. I was sitting with an accountant that I got to know through my internship program. And we're sitting in a Thai food shop in Mountain View. And we just said, hey, you've been using different payroll providers. How are things going? Tell us pros and cons. kind of expecting her to talk about it for a couple of minutes, maybe. It was like an hour and 15 minutes of me writing down all the different feedback points, very, very, very specific. So these are the sort of people that are really helpful. It's not that you're going to do every little thing that they tell you to do. And it's not that every single insight they have is exactly amazing. But if you have enough of these folks and you can see the patterns and you can kind of see, you have the data to go and use. So that's the first thing. It's around like kind of, do they kind of provide high value in specific product feedback? The other thing is, do they have time and interest to sit with you? So again, I was literally going to their office every 2 weeks, seeing them run payroll. So as an example, one of our first customers, that company name was Karsabi, was just a few guys in a room building software to help for like a marketplace for used cars. And I went to their office. I remember helping them onboard their first employees. So I go to the CEO and I sit next to the CEO, and the CEO goes through the adding employee flow. And one of the questions we asked in the add employee flow is, how much are you going to pay this person? And I saw how they were sitting there, and they had the employee right next to them because they had the employee put in their own details. So it was a very, very awkward look where the employee was like, okay, I just put in my address and SSN. I'm going to leave now, and you're going to put in how much you're going to pay me. It's just like a very weird interaction. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Here's a product insight. We should have the employees have their own self-service admin where they put in their information, and the administrator, like the CEO, put in their own information, do their own work, and separate those two to two different interactions. And that kind of solves that, that awkwardness and enabled it. This sort of thing enabled me to see like, oh, actually, the employee experience is really, really important. It's not just the employer or the admin experience. It's also the employee experience. So that kind of started the whole place for us to differentiate. So it's really important for these initial customers for you to feel like you can spend time with them. You can watch them as they use your product.
Well, that's actually an interesting segue into my next point, which is, you're selling something that's very painful, but also mission critical. And when you're selling something into a traditional SMB that may not be used to, again, shopping for software, you really have to engender trust, especially because, they can't afford to mess up payroll and let their employees down. Is there, but at the same time, you're an early startup, right? Is there anything you had to do to quote unquote like fake it till you make it, or just signal trust, or that you're going to be there for your customers, even though you were very much still in the early days?
Totally, yeah. So I think that's a great question. I think for us, the trust point, we basically used everything we had. Whether it's showcasing the number of customers we already have on our website, whether it's like literally taking pictures of ourselves in suits and put that in the team page, so we don't look like super young and like, or anything like that. Putting customer quotes there, actually sharing a lot about the amount of money that we raised. That's not a small thing for, businesses to know that, oh, this is a real company. The rest, back then the seed round was $6 million seed round. So it feels like it's a real thing. And then that's also one of the ways that we got to work with accountants a lot, because we figured out that, hey, accountants are a big part of the decision process for small businesses often. And if accountants believe in Gusto, then that can help their small businesses also believe in us. So we started working with accountants more and more closely, and we learned that, again, they're awesome to work with, many of them, just so awesome. They know so much about the space, and they can really help us build a great solution for their clients. So that was, I would say, another thing.
I think when you guys initially went out to the accountants, they were not being inundated with software by any means. And I'm curious how you thought about the right time to bring accountants in, from two perspectives. One is, oftentimes the conventional advice is focus on your direct go-to-market and then start thinking about like channel partnerships, et cetera. The second thing is also, I think accountants want to save time, right? But then they also don't necessarily like love signing up for tons, or didn't at that time at least, sign up for lots of software. So I'm curious like how you thought about timing for bringing accountants or approaching them, and also just how you thought about convincing them.
I would say originally we thought that it's going to take us longer to go to accountants than what actually happened. We thought it would be like year 3, 4, 5 sort of thing. And we ended up probably at year 2. starting working with accountants pretty seriously. And the reason is that we saw customers coming in and saying, "Hey, I love what you do, and I want to work with you. But here's this accountant that I work with, and I really, really trust her." And then we ended up, myself as well as others, but I was doing a lot of customer, still today, a lot of customer. I love talking with customers. My favorite thing in the world. So I was talking with a bunch of these newer first accountants that we got to work with, and it's a little bit of like a selection bias, but these are very, very innovative accountants that were open and interested in talking about new payroll solutions. So as I was talking with them and learning from them, I kind of learned that actually we're not that far off. There's a few things we need to go and work on to have a solution that's good enough for them to get going. So we're not that far off. So we started with literally, it's like an onboarding project for one of our, I would say engineer, maybe engineer number 4 or 5 in the company. So very, very early engineer, and they came in like an onboarding project. It's kind of like an intern project. And they started building something, working very closely with those 2 kind of initial accountants. And we saw they started using it and they loved it. So it was ready. So we kind of kept growing it from there. So I would say, to summarize, so how did we know? I would say we originally thought it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years because of exactly what you said. But when push came to shove, we actually started talking with these accountants. We learned that the distance was not that far. We started with a low cost way, which is a kind of engineering onboarding project, which could sometimes be throwaway code anyway. We saw that it's getting traction. So then we doubled up and continued working on it.
Well, I think to that note, are there ever things that you hear that you are like, oh, this is bad, or makes you think, hey, we're not doing, especially in the early days, we're not doing X, Y, or Z right, and we should have done it this other way? And how much do you sort of index on the feedback, good or bad?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's all about balance, right? So, on one side, being kind of locked in your office and not talking with the external world, just imagining a great product and building it to market is probably a stupid idea, because you're going to end up being kind of, imagining things that without being connected to reality. On the other side, if you are obsessed with every single piece of feedback that people give you, you're going to build a Frankenstein, and it's going to be just a random sort of feature. So the way I look at this is it's just you got to have a funnel of ideas, right? And you build that funnel, and that funnel should include, new customers that are just onboarding right now, prospective customers that decided not to go with you, prospective customers that are considering you, people who been using it for 3 years, your investors, your teammates, and that's the funnel of ideas. And then your job is to figure out, okay, how do I use that as an input to again figure out what really is the thing to focus on, and that's where your product vision comes in. What are we trying to be, right? Where are we trying to differentiate? What are we trying to do differently? And then you bring all those things in, and it helps you kind of pour in concrete ideas and steps into what you're trying to do. So here's one example from the early days that just comes up to my head. Contract store payments. So when we envisioned in the beginning, this idea of what is a payroll product for a small business, we thought about, okay, you pay W-2 employees, you pay some 1099 contractors, and that's basically it. And once we started doing that, what we noticed that people start using our 1099 kind of contractor payments a lot, but for another reason, another way. They use it to actually pay vendors. And we didn't think about that. That was not a use case. So started calling up these customers, understand what they're doing, and seems like they really like the record keeping and the way that we do the ACH transfers and all of that. So we made a feature out of that, and that was super early. That was like year 3, maybe 2 or 3. So kind of learning from customers around that, and the reason that we decided to do it and not just tell people, stop doing this. The system is not built for that. Is because we saw a future where Gusto is doing much more than just payroll, but rather Gusto is really this all-in-one system for small businesses, including things like vendor payments.
Shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about self-serve and PLG. So I'm curious, especially in the early days, how did you guys think about what does it mean to be self-serve, and like enabling people again to trust you through a more self-serve motion, and was it even self-serve, or was it more sort of sales and sales enabled or sales closed, or however you might want to call it, in the early days?
Yeah. So on the go-to-market, so let's talk about go-to-market and then the customer support side. Okay. So the
Sure.
go-to-market side, we only added sales later on in the process. So only after, so that's like, I think it's year 3 or 4. So earlier on, it was completely just self-serve, and people could call us, and they will talk with either me or when we hired the customer support folks to talk with them. So we didn't really have sales. So that was the entire engine was built on. And then again, over the years, we built a better and better engine, and sales today is a huge part of Gusto, really, really important part of Gusto, but it does not take away from the fact that customers self-serve still today. Okay. So that's one. That kind of enables you in the world when you think about CAC budget. It gives you a lever. You say, okay, well, maybe this year we want to rely more on sales and kind of increase that budget or keep it the same, right? So that's kind of the lever. You don't have to have closers that the product could close itself. Okay, so that's the go-to-market side. On the CX side, it was really important for us. So CX, customer experience, customer support, operations, all of that stuff. Payroll is not just software. There's a lot of backend. There's thousands of tax agencies that you need to work with. Those tax agencies change the rules often, not just on a quarterly basis, sometimes randomly. The county of somewhere in Pennsylvania decides that they want to introduce a new payroll rule in that specific school district, and you got to do it, right? So you need to have all this infrastructure, and some of it is people. You got to actually call up and understand those local tax agencies. So what we did is we had in our brain, like in our target of like, here's the ratio between number of customers to number of operations / CX folks since really the beginning. I remember this very, very first spreadsheet that we had. And that was a goal. And every time we made decisions, like a lot of product decisions or hiring decisions around customer care, like what should customer help with versus what should be self-serve, like we looked at that ratio and we asked ourselves, are we marching towards this ratio or away from this ratio? So that was really, really important early on, and enabled everyone to kind of have the same vision of like, hey, we are really building a self-service tool here. Self-service before you buy and self-service after you buy, with some human support for the edge cases and for areas where you need help. But really the thing should really stand, the product should be intelligent. It should be it should feel like you're getting the assistance personalized to you in the experience itself without talking with anyone if you don't want to.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, you really wanted self-serve to work. And did the first few customers actually go through the website and sign up, or did you build the sort of online flow after you had, your first beta customers using it, who you had signed up probably yourselves?
So for the very, very first customers, there was no UI yet. Like some UI was not built yet. So the UI was me. So literally I would come in to your office and say, all right, Seema, I see you want to onboard 2 employees and 1 contractor. We have the UI for the employees, so let's go through it. And I'm going to watch you, and I'm going to see which questions you ask me, and then improve the product on the back end. But we don't have a UI for a contractor, so just tell me, and I'm going to use. I'm just going to do it manually on my computer. So we've done that for the first. This is like very first 16. We were talking about this podcast. So first 16 customers definitely had a lot of this manual stuff. But once we got to called 100 customers, there wasn't any manual stuff. It was all product.
And so people would come to the website, sign up, and go through the flow.
Exactly.
Got it. Awesome.
Exactly. Now they might get a call from me, say, "Hey, I noticed you did this. Why?" But that's just that is more of a kind of product research as opposed to like it has to happen.
Sure. One of the stories I've heard is that Eddie, one of your co-founder, Eddie's mom was one of the first customers of Gusto. Would love to just hear a little bit about that and how that happened.
Yeah, totally. So Eddie's mom is together with Eddie's dad. They have like a clinic. So like a doctor's clinic. So she kind of runs all the back office, and Eddie actually had a bunch of experiences when he was growing up building software for the clinic. So it's pretty cool that, years later, she ended up, without telling Eddie, by the way, or telling anyone, just onboarding to Gusto on her own, did a bunch of customer care calls as well, and kind of like started using the product. And when you get feedback from your mom on the product, it kind of goes up in the priorities.
Totally.
Yeah, but it was honestly like a wonderful kind of closing the circle, the circle moment for Eddie, and it's just a really really fun experience to see her use the app today as well.
No, totally. I mean, I think a lot of the people I talk to, they don't actually get to build software for their their lives outside of Silicon Valley or outside of tech, and so it's probably pretty gratifying to actually see this pain point get solved so close to home. But and also it's almost a tagline, software for your mom.
Yeah,
And,
build
and
software for your
in
mom.
both it's utility and probably simplicity and ease of use.
Well said.
Last topic I'd love to touch on is just learnings, having gone through this, startup journey now. Any advice that you would give your earlier self around finding and winning in customers in the early days and go to market?
Yeah, looking back, I think, definitely. So we're talking with all these different potential customers, trying to figure out where is the right fit. We had this big whiteboard we were working together in our home. We're roommates, and I was always trying to fit everyone into some sort of a 2x2 framework, or like some sort of segmentation framework, like being kind of creating a strategy framework of like really who are the right customers to focus on first. And I would say, looking backwards, I underestimated the importance of focusing on people who are really, really passionate about helping you succeed. And by that, they're going to spend a lot of time with you, giving you the raw customer feedback that you need in order to figure out what the strategy is going to be later on. So how does that look like? It looks like when you talk with people, just listen, see their level of excitement. When someone is like, okay, yeah, that's cool, I could try it. Okay, that's like kind of in the middle excitement level. When someone is, no, I'm not interested, well, you know what to do with that. But when someone is like, I want to do it right now, let's jump in and let's show me what your product is. And here's the 1,000 ideas I'm gonna kind of share one thing at a time. And I'm gonna text you out of there and call you. And these are the folks that, even if they're not exactly the right fit perhaps for your initial vision, they may end up being quite influential for you to understand the market better. Again, with all the caveats that you gotta think high level, and there's like a lot of different customers you need to bring in as your inputs. But I would not underestimate the value of customer passion, and in the early days on helping you as a founder kind of figure out through the product market fit maze, as they call it.
Did you ever rethink a customer segment that you might go after, or kind of target a different customer as a result of one of these, like a great initial, design partner, early customer that you had?
Totally. So accountants is that for me. Like we thought accountants are only going to come later on. And then we got some of these early innovative accountants that were just so passionate about what we're trying to do. And even, in spite of us thinking that, we're not ready yet, we spent the time with them. And, looking backwards, that was just a very, very important decision to make. And, I wish we would have done it even earlier, bringing those folks on board, because they were so incredibly helpful.
And one other thing you mentioned was also like the 2x2s, and also having an analysis around CAC. A question we often hear from early time founder, first time founders or early on in the journey, let's say, is how much time should I spend thinking about, does the math work, especially for SMB software, right? And so I'm curious, like, did you guys hold yourself to some math or model or forecast early on, or was it more like, again, like, let's make sure customers love this and we'll figure the distribution math out later?
There was much less, math frameworks for content available back then. So I would say, it's not that we were so smart about ignoring conventional wisdom. Like, that conventional wisdom was not that shared back then. So we did have some rules of thumb. Like, we knew, we had previous startups before, and we knew that there is a way of like faking growth by just throwing money at the problem. We knew we didn't want that. So for us, what did that mean? With simple rules of thumb was like, we saw that, the unit economics here, like just the amount of revenue per customer, is going to be low compared to enterprise and high compared to consumer. So you can't put sales, you can't just rely on sales for acquisition, right? So it had to be everything, self-serve, self-onboarding, the entire thing. So that's the first rule of thumb. So the second rule of thumb is just week after week growth. We just wanted to see that growth number really, really high. We wanted to get to the 20%, 15%, 10%. It had to be significant. And we knew that if it's not significant, this is in the early days, like we would be just, freaked out. We took it very, very seriously, like high growth, and we call it CAC-sponsible growth. So responsible from a CAC perspective. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, looks like we're at time. Tomer, this was awesome. Thank you so much for walking me through the story of Gusto in the early days and what it was like to acquire your first set of customers.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This was fun.
I'd like to close by thanking my guest for sharing their insights on finding early customers and building strong businesses. You can hear the rest of My First 16 by going to a16z.com/podcasts. And be sure to visit a16z.com/enterprise for the latest industry-related content. There you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter. Thanks for tuning in.